Hello, my name is 21 Agatron, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we'll be diving into one of the most underrated champions in Marvel Contest of Champions, Dr. Octopus. So, Dr. Octopus. He's one of those champions that most players acknowledge as decent or usable, with low damage and some utility. However, the extent of his damage and his utility is not widely known, and he's more often than not passed over when it comes to rank up decisions. What I'm hoping to do is demonstrate just how good Doc Ock really is, because if played well, he has a level of control that few other champions have. He's worth a look, and I'll talk about and show why. Alright, his basic abilities. Doc Ock's kit is based around his research. Research sounds a bit complicated in the description, but I'll do my best to simplify it, so please bear with me. Doc Ock has 3 categories: physics, chemistry, and biology. Each category has a different way to gain research. For physics, it's by the opponent gaining power. For chemistry, it's by him being struck on the block. And for biology, it's by striking the opponent or being struck by the opponent. If you haven't gained research in that category for 10 seconds, it begins to fall off over time. This may sound stressful, but it's very easy to maintain or recuperate. Each category gains a passive scaling effect that increases as research increases. As you build physics, the opponent's special damage gets reduced. As you build chemistry, your block proficiency increases, and as you build biology, your attack increases. All categories are capped at 100, so the scaling effect is not infinite. When a category reaches 100, it triggers a breakthrough for 5 seconds, which is an additional effect that's different depending on which category got the breakthrough. For physics, it places a power lock debuff on the opponent. For chemistry, it places a heal block debuff on the opponent. And for biology, he activates an armor up buff on himself. If a breakthrough is already active, another one cannot be gained. So for example, if the opponent is power locked from a physics breakthrough, then a heal block or armor up from the other 2 categories can't be triggered. When a breakthrough expires, or is purified, research in all 3 categories is dropped to 0. This is something you want to avoid as much as possible, since you'd have lost your scaling bonus and you'd have to build back up in order to trigger breakthroughs again. I know that sounds like a lot, but in order to get the best out of Doc Ock, you need to be familiar with his research and each category. A side note here, if you look at the additional block proficiency he gets from building chemistry research, it actually pushes him above champs like Dr. Doom, Cosmic Ghost Rider, and a lot of others known for their high block proficiency. You'll have 0 damage on well-timed blocks if you keep chemistry research at 100 as long as there's no interfering nodes and you invest in block proficiency masteries in the defense tab. Just something I found interesting. Moving on to his heavy attack. He removes all currently active breakthroughs and deals a burst of damage per breakthrough removed. Now I know that sounds bad because above it said that Ock's research gets set to 0 when they expire, but it's actually not. It removes the breakthrough, deals damage, and doesn't reset your research. This is good because if you got a breakthrough you didn't want, say the armor up, you can remove it and place one of the other ones. You can even re-trigger the same breakthrough with the full duration if you choose. As you'll see in the fights I have later in the video, Ock's physics category is the one you want most of the time, since you can spam heavies in the corner, simultaneously dealing burst damage and maintaining the power control utility. His special one has 2 effects, depending on what's happening when you use it. If there is a breakthrough already active, so the power lock, heal block, or armor up, it resets the duration. If no breakthroughs are currently active, it triggers the breakthrough of whichever category is currently the highest. The special one is all about getting or maintaining the breakthroughs so the research doesn't drop to 0. Most of the time, it's used to refresh a breakthrough rather than activate one, which is good because you won't always get the opening you need for a heavy attack. His special 2 is interesting here because depending on the matchup, it's very good. Using it triggers the breakthrough effect of all research categories currently at 100 and resets the duration of all breakthroughs to 3.5 seconds per category currently at 100. What this says is if you have physics, chemistry, and biology all at 100 and then use the special 2, it will trigger all the breakthroughs with a longer duration, so you'll get the power lock, heal block, and armor up all at the same time. Paired with the special 1 refreshing the duration, you'll shut down the opponent's ability or passive power gain, combat power gain, and regeneration for the rest of the fight, so long as they're maintained. There's not many situations where you'll need all this, and it is certainly more stressful than the special 3 special 1 playstyle to maintain, but the heavy attack removing all breakthroughs makes a nice red number if you're going for damage. The special 3, it copies 1 currently active breakthrough with a duration of 5 seconds, increased by 10 seconds per currently active breakthrough. What's happening here is that using the special 3 while a breakthrough is active will give you a 15-second breakthrough effect, so a 15-second power lock, heal block, or armor up. Once again, if you pair it with a special 1, it'll shut down either the opponent's power or regen depending on the breakthrough chosen. The reason why I don't talk about the armor up that much is because there isn't a reason to activate it over the other two breakthroughs. At least, there isn't yet. Alright, let's talk about his signature ability. His SIG lets him start the fight with each of his research categories at 60 and adds an additional effect to each breakthrough. For physics, you drain 100% of the power the opponent would gain if they weren't affected by a power lock, and you seal an amount of the power drained. For chemistry, you deal direct damage equal to 100% of health gained and lifesteal an amount of the damage done. For biology, you gain some armor penetration while your armor up is active. The big things to take away from here are his research starts at 60, meaning you get the first breakthrough quicker and gain control of the fight quicker. His power lock now steals part of the power the opponent would gain, and his heal block inflicts damage equal to the amount of regen the opponent would gain. The first two things make it so that it's less stressful to get to and work around your breakthroughs. You'll have a breakthrough within your first 5 hit combo, sometimes sooner. If the power lock is the breakthrough you have active, which is pretty much every matchup it's the one you want anyways, it's much easier to keep it active, so a defensive AI or not being able to throw a heavy is less punishing. It also makes the Special 2, Special 1 playstyle doable in the average fight, so one without passive power gain and just combat power gain. That last point, the damage from the heal block, is interesting because it doesn't count as heal reversal. There's a few fights I've got here that give it a chance to shine, but for the moment we're going to Aunt May. Alrighty, so we are back on Aunt May. First things first, I want to show off how his signature ability scales. So if you're looking here, you can see that within SIG 1 to SIG 20, there's quite a big increase. It's quite a sharp increase between those two intervals. But then it starts to flatten out the closer and closer you get to SIG 200. So what that means is that the first 20 SIGs seem to be given the most benefit per SIG, and then that sort of decreases as the SIGs increase. So it seems like the first 20 SIGs are important, which is a natural awakening usually, and then past that, not that important. And it shows in the SIG ability. So if you look at physics, physics starts at 5.71% and goes up to 15% of power drained. Chemistry goes from 15.71% to 25% of the damage done. And biology goes from 409.52 to 884 armor penetration. So what this is showing here is that it's got this roughly less than 10% increase for physics and chemistry, and it almost doubles for biology. But if you look at SIG 20, the power steal is 8.16%, and then the chemistry is lifesteal of 18.16% of the damage done. So between those two intervals, SIG 1 and SIG 20, you get like a 3% increase for those SIG abilities. But then beyond that, it's only like an additional 7% over the remaining 180 SIGs to get him to max SIG. So all in all, he's not worth a SIG investment. SIG 20 works just fine. Okay, so next thing I wanted to talk about was his synergies. So he has biochemistry with Ant-Man, where he will start with 40 additional chemistry research at the beginning of the fight. Then he has engineering with Vulture, where research categories will no longer fall off over time. Then he has Nemesis with Stark Spidey and Classic Spidey, where the whole team gets a little bit of extra attack. And then particle physics with Electro, where Doc Ock will no longer have his research categories reset to 0 after a breakthrough expires. Instead, they'll reset to 50. So all in all, the synergies are not needed, but the Electro one is the nicest out of these 4 because it means you have a less ground to make up after a breakthrough expires on accident. Alright, so the next thing I wanted to mention is synergies that other champions have with Doc Ock. For the sake of time, I'll stick to the ones that have more of a unique effect. So first up is Genius Ingenuity with Dr. Doom, where Dr. Doom gets 20% increased shock and incinerate debuff potency, and it only affects Dr. Doom. This synergy is okay. It doesn't really give that much of a benefit because Dr. Doom does enough damage on his own and there's no benefit for Doc Ock, just something that's kind of nice if you're running both at the same time. Next, there's Madcap Experimentalists with Diablo, where Diablo's special attacks have a 70% chance to inflict a stun debuff lasting 1.5 seconds per level of special attack used, and then Dr. Octopus gains plus 35% heal block debuff duration. So this is a better synergy for Diablo than it is for Doc Ock because it means that Diablo has easier ways to get openings after his special attacks are over, and then Doc Ock gains a little bit of heal block duration, which is nice in matchups where you want to keep it up, but most of the time it's not really that needed. So it's kind of a nice synergy, not necessary. Next synergy I wanted to mention was Shared Knowledge Robotics with Mr. Fantastic, where tech and science champions debuffs also apply an indefinite power sting, dealing direct damage equal to 60% of their attack rating when the opponent activates a special attack. The power sting stacks up to 3 times. So this is a very nice synergy because it applies to any tech or science champion. There's a few nodes here and there in Act 6 and 7 where the opponent needs a Power Sting on them to receive damage, and the pool of champions with access to Power Sting in their base kit is fairly limited. This synergy, however, expands it to 2 classes, which is essentially a third of the available champions in the contest. However, both Mr. Fantastic and Doc Ock limit the opponent's power so much that they don't benefit too much from the synergy, so it's more like a support synergy to open the gate for other champions. Nice, not needed. Next up is Sinister 6 with Kraven. So synergy champions, when fighting #heroes, combat power rate is increased by 25%. This is also a decent synergy, but I don't have a high enough level Kraven to be able to test this personally. What I understand from this is when fighting #heroes, Doc Ock will have an easier time keeping up his breakthroughs. Next synergy I wanted to mention is Time Travelers with Anti-Venom, where Anti-Venom prevents the opponent from gaining buffs for the first 10 seconds of the fight, and then Ock gets a 25% chance per breakthrough removed to inflict an additional burst of damage on his heavy. Once again, I don't have a high enough version of Anti-Venom to test it personally, but it seems like a decent bump to Doc Ock's damage. I'm not familiar enough with Anti-Venom to speak to how good it is for him, but all in all, I don't see it as make or break for either champion. Alright, now we'll get into gameplay in a moment, but I wanted to mention some things first. First up, my Doc Ock is rank 3 660, so he has more damage and more health than what most people would have him at, but how he controls the fight is the exact same. Number 2, I'm not the best player, and I make mistakes. Get smacked a lot, so the fights aren't the cleanest, but even with all that, I'm still able to keep control of the fight. Number 3, I don't like relying on parry, since the deeper into content you go, the more you'll come across fights that prevent you from using it. You'll see me trying a lot of backdraft intercepts, which is dashing back mid-combo, then either dashing right back in, or using a light attack immediately after, and stand-up intercepting, which is using a medium or light while the opponent is in their get-up animation. Lastly, feel free to pause whenever you need at the beginning of each clip if you want to read the node descriptions for yourself. I'll talk about any nodes that are important, but some people like to read it on their own. Alright, so first up is the default punching bag, Winter Soldier. I've spoken a lot about Doc Ock, and I hope you got the impression that he's got very strong power control and regen control. But what happens when he doesn't need power control or regen control? What about just an average matchup? Well, it's just a lot of heavy spam. See, Ock is all about getting the opponent in the corner and just controlling them however he needs. When you only need the fight to be over quick, he's really simple. Get the power lock breakthrough as quick as you can, push the opponent into the corner, and go from there. As I mentioned before, it's heavy spam. When the opponent is in the corner, his heavy has enough reach to chain it repeatedly, and you're safe to do so until the opponent reaches a bar of power. When that happens, bait it out and go in again. The reason why I said get the power lock breakthrough earlier is because it allows you to get more heavies in before the opponent reaches that bar of power. You'll see me go for the special 2s here, just because I wanted to show off that big burst from removing all the breakthroughs. In an average matchup, there's no need for the other special attacks. He got it down in 97 hits, which isn't the fastest for a 6-star rank 3, but it's still very respectable, and a lot of those champs that outdamage him can't do what he does. Alright, so the first fight I wanted to show here is the Act 6.1.1 Sabretooth boss. There's nothing super out of the ordinary for this fight in terms of power or regen, but there is Oscillate, and a global node called No Retreat. Oscillate just manipulates the AI, making them cycle between super aggressive and super passive, which can be slightly problematic if they won't throw specials, but without any passive power gain, it's not that tough. No Retreat means that dashing back starts a timer, and dashing back again while that timer is active inflicts a degeneration passive on you, so not pleasant. When do you typically have to dash back a lot? Baiting or dexing specials. What makes Doc Ock so good here? Making him have access to less specials. You see me use the special 2 in this fight while all my research is at 100 to get both Power Lock and Heal Black on him, since Sabretooth does have an annoying regen, and then spam special 1s to refresh them. He got 1 bar of power that whole fight, and I never got forced to degen from no retreat. Not many champs can do the same. Let's move on. Next up, we have Symbiote Supreme boss in Act 6.2.1. Once again, not too much here, except for the global node Life Cycle. Life Cycle is an immortality mechanic that says when it's active and the champion would be knocked out, they'll regen up 10% of their health, which can be annoying. So how do you deactivate it? Well, you knock the opponent down and it will go on cooldown. Each time you knock them down, the cooldown gets longer and longer, which is perfect for a champ like Doc Ock, whose heavy inflicts burst damage. Something that makes Doc Ock a top option for this fight, however, is Symbiote Supreme's passive power gain. See, when the opponent has passive power gain, Doc Ock's Power Lock breakthrough will keep triggering itself after it's been removed. So, if you've been watching, after I got the Power Lock, the fight was basically over. I spam heavy and inflict my burst damage, Life Cycle goes on cooldown, and then the Power Lock immediately re-triggers. Sim Supreme didn't even come close to a bar of power before the fight was over, just an overall domination over the fight. Here we've got Bishop in 6.2.5. This fight was less to show off the nodes and more so to show off the Bishop matchup, since after his buff back in July, Bishop is a much more difficult defender because of 2 things. He gets unblockable specials after a certain number of prowess or when overloading, and after his special 1 he gains this steady release passive, which inflicts an incinerate on you every 0.7 seconds if you're near him. The great thing is that Doc Ock can shut down Bishop's power, as you would see me do if the fight were longer. Here, I don't need to worry about regen control, so I go for the special 3, making sure I activate the Power Lock breakthrough before using it so I get the 15-second debuff, shutting down his 2 major threatening abilities. Unfortunately, the fight ends before I get the chance to spam special 1s, but that would be what I would do if the fight didn't end there. This fight is the War Machine in 6.2.5. It's a different path than the Bishop, but I wanted to show it off because he has 200% increased combat power rate. So, striking him will give roughly triple the power it normally would, something that can get out of hand very quickly. This is where the power steal portion of Doc Ock's SIG really gets to shine. War Machine would gain a lot of power if he wasn't power locked with the physics breakthrough, but since he is, Doc Ock gains a portion of it. This means Ock will get to his special 3 sooner, which means he gets the 15-second power lock sooner, which means War Machine's massive power gain is completely shut down. Alright, here we've got one of the hardest fights in the entire game, 6.2.5 Mordo. This guy is a pain for a number of reasons. You can't parry for your openings since he'll evade and degen you, he's got Spite, which means if you have a buff active he'll gain power, he's got unblockable specials, Special Delivery, which degens you if you land 15 hits without throwing a special attack, and then this Strength in Numbers node, which reduces your attack and ability accuracy by 12.5% per dead teammate. Nasty fight, especially when paired with his base kit passive power gain and naturally defensive AI. Early on I got lucky because I parried and was able to time the start of my heavy to connect after the stun had ended, and then I was able to push him into the corner and take advantage of the passive AI to start my heavy spam. I had to use a special 1 to avoid degen from Special Delivery, and from there it was just careful play to use my heavies and specials to keep my research up, his power down, and Special Delivery out of the way. This is not an easy fight, but Ock handled it quite well. Okay, here we have the 6.3.3 Havok boss. Now this Havok can be tricky since he has Extinction Protocol, which increases his combat power rate after throwing a special, Improved Power Gain, which increases his power gain by 50%, and Crumbling Armor, which inflicts armor break if Havok isn't struck in 6 seconds. If you're not familiar with Havok, he's tricky because of two main things. He has passive power gain and plasma. Plasma starts off on Havok as plasma charges, stacking up to 10 and increasing his special attack damage, but when it goes above 10 it becomes a plasma buildup debuff on the opponent, which when reaching 10 stacks inflicts a bunch of energy damage. Plasma charges are removed when Havok is power drained and the opponent takes no damage from plasma buildup when they have an armor up buff. Crumbling Armor can cause the build-up interaction, but Doc Ock stops it before it even gets there by shutting down the plasma charges with the upgraded physics breakthrough on his signature ability. So, during Havok matchups, Doc Ock controls both his power and his plasma, making him one of the best Havok options. This fight, as I'm sure you noticed, is no different than the Sim Supreme matchup, where every time I used a heavy to remove my power lock, it was immediately reapplied. Here, I chose to just keep his power under control with the Special 3, Special 1 rotation. It makes it a longer fight, but I'm still fully in control, and I actually finished at higher health thanks to willpower healing from the plasma buildup debuffs. Here is the nastiest Hyperion in the game, 6.3.4. Aside from his base power gain, he's got Aspect of Evolution, which raises all stats by 5% every time he gains a bar of power, Bubble Shield, which reduces block proficiency by 6% every time he hits your block, and also goes unblockable after every 10 blocked hits, Brute Force, which inflicts degen if he isn't struck after 6 seconds, doubled ability power gain, and finally Supercharge, which gives him a 10-second power gain buff worth 20% of max power every 15 seconds. Just by far the hardest Hyperion ever released. This fight is super tricky, and a lot of power control champs cannot handle it. Doom handles it, Magic can do it, though you might need to try a few times to get it down and it'll be long, and then Doc Ock rules it. With the Sig ability, Ock turns some of that insane power gain Hyperion has into his. He got to 2 special ones, 2 bars of power on the hardest Hyperion in the game. How often does a regular Hyperion get only 2 bars of power in a fight? Ock's power control is no joke. Alright, let's pivot from power control and talk about regen control. Here we have Wolverine X-23 in 6.4.3. Not a hard fight by any means, but what makes it interesting is Lionheart. Lionheart prevents debuffs from reducing or preventing healing abilities, giving the healing increased potency and inflicting damage on the attacker instead. The reason why this is so interesting is Doc Ock's Sig Enhanced Heal block, which, as mentioned before, deals damage equal to what the defender would regen and heals Ock for a percentage of the damage done. So, she's not healing, she's taking damage, and Ock is healing himself. I just wanted to show that off a little bit with Lionheart because usual regen reversal champs like Void and Mr. Fantastic don't work, so it's pretty unique. Up next, here's an interesting lane in 7.2.3 where Ock gets to show off both power control and regen control simultaneously against a Human Torch with Vigor and Supercharge. This isn't a hard fight or lane either, especially since the superiority nodes provide a lot of options, but it's a chance to show just how easily Ock makes it. Get the opponent into the corner, heavy spam, get to a special 2, and then special 1 spam. This is the Sorcerer Supreme boss in 7.3.4. Spite, steady build up unblockable, which makes her go unblockable when the attacker has 3 debuffs, Staggering Beauty, which applies a stagger debuff to the attacker when close, unblockable specials, and then Prey on the Weak, which gives her 5% power when a buff expires on the attacker. She's also a bit annoying since she applies unavoidable debuffs with her specials in 2 out of her 3 phases, and she's also tough to punish after her special 1. Right at the start I gave her too much power because I couldn't get rid of my armor up buff, so I got myself to a special 3 after she reached 1 bar of power, so I had her locked after she threw that special 1. From there it was just spam heavy and win. For our last serious fight, we've got 7.3.5 Cable, with Surge Protector, which gives him a charge each time he's struck. If I use my special first, he takes damage, but if he uses his special first, it consumes less power. He's also got 200% enhanced abilities, which means his base kit regen and Power Flood will trigger more often. Vigorous Assault, which means he goes unblockable when a regen is active, and Aggressive, which means he should dash in, throw heavies, and throw specials more often. Aggressive is good, because that means it'll be easier to backdraft him for openings to maintain my breakthroughs. I got myself to the special 3 and baited out a special 1, so he would be stuck under a bar of power, and he wouldn't be a threat anymore. Then used my special 1s to upkeep the power lock until I could get into my special 2 special 1 rotation. Alright, so that's that. I feel like I've said and shown off all I wanted, and I hope I was successful in demonstrating just how good a champion Doc Ock is. He's a bit tricky to pick up if you're not used to intercepting, but he's much lower skill than champs like Tigra or Ghost, and the intercepting is more for the really tough fights. He is way under the radar right now, and if you're looking for a solid tech or power control rank up, he'll do that and more for you. I took mine to rank 3 and can honestly say I have zero regrets and that I'm excited to see what comes next. Some final things I wanted to mention. Doc Ock is a tech villain champ, so he works really well for Variant 1, some fights in Variant 2 if he can heavy spam, Variant 3, Variant 4, and Variant 6, and he's hashtag metal, which means he isn't good against the Magnetos or Terrax. Finally, I'd like to mention a few resources created by other members of the MCOC community. Big thanks to Janick, who created a Google Doc that goes more in-depth on the different rotations that Doc Ock has depending on the matchup, and Steel22, whose Doc Ock breakdown video was a fantastic starting point for me. Both resources are linked in the description below. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and consider subscribing. Thank you and have a nice day.